Hello, my name is Ethan. I'm 31. I work as a carpenter, mostly custom furniture and home renovations, and I live in a small apartment above the workshop I rent on the east side of town. It's not much, but the smell of sawdust and the sound of rain on the metal roof have become home to me over the past few years. I've never been much for parties. The noise, the crowds, the small talk that never seems to lead anywhere meaningful. It all feels like trying to build something without proper measurements. But when my friend Ryan invited me to his birthday party last Saturday, I couldn't really say no. We've known each other since high school, back when we both thought we'd conquer the world by 25. Now we're both past 30, and the world feels more like something we're still figuring out how to live in. The party was at Ryan's house, a modest two-bedroom place he shares with his girlfriend Sophia. I arrived fashionably late, which for me means exactly on time, carrying a bottle of decent whiskey and hoping I could stay long enough to be polite without feeling completely drained. The living room was packed with people I half recognized. College friends, coworkers, neighbors, the kind of crowd where everyone knows everyone else's business, but nobody really knows anyone at all. I found Ryan in the kitchen already a few drinks in, his face flushed with the particular happiness that comes from being surrounded by people who showed up just for you. He clapped me on the shoulder and handed me a beer before I could even say hello. "Ethan, I was wondering if you'd actually show up," he said, grinning. "You know how you get about parties. I'm here, aren't I?" I took a sip of the beer. It was one of those craft IPAs that tastes like someone dissolved a pine tree in it, but I smiled anyway. "Happy birthday, man." We talked for a few minutes about work, about the dining table I was building for a client, about his job at the insurance office that he described with the same enthusiasm most people reserve for root canals. The conversation had that comfortable rhythm of old friendship, but I could see his attention drifting toward other guests, other conversations he needed to have. I didn't mind. That's how parties work. I made my way to the living room, found a spot near the bookshelf where I could observe without being directly in anyone's line of conversation. Ryan had always been a reader, and I found myself scanning the titles, mostly sci-fi, paperbacks, and philosophy books left over from college. I was reading The Spine of Something by Ursula K. Le Guin when someone appeared beside me. Finding anything interesting, I turned and saw Olivia, Ryan's older sister. I hadn't seen her in probably 3 years. Not since Ryan's last birthday party, actually. She looked different. Her dark hair was shorter now, just touching her shoulders, and she was wearing a simple black dress that somehow made her seem both more elegant and more approachable than I remembered. "Just browsing," I said. "Your brother's got good taste in books. Most of those are mine, actually. I left them here when I moved out." She smiled, and I noticed she was holding a glass of red wine instead of the beer everyone else seemed to be drinking. "I'm Olivia, in case you don't remember." Ethan and I remember. Of course I remembered. Olivia had been one of those people who seemed to exist in a different orbit when we were younger, 3 years older, already in college when Ryan and I were still figuring out how to drive. She'd been intimidating in the way that smart, confident women are intimidating to 18-year-old boys who think they know everything but actually know nothing. "You're the carpenter, right? Ryan mentioned you built him that coffee table." I nodded toward the living room where people were using the table I'd made as a surface for drinks and snacks. It was a simple piece walnut with clean lines, but I was proud of it. Guilty as charged. "It's beautiful work, really." She ran her finger along the edge of the bookshelf we were standing next to. "Did you make this too?" "No, that's IKEA, but I could probably build you something better if you ever need it." The words came out before I could stop them, and I immediately felt foolish. Was I offering to build furniture for someone I barely knew? What was wrong with me? But Olivia just laughed. A genuine sound that cut through the party noise. "I might take you up on that. My apartment could use some actual furniture instead of the collection of hand-me-downs and thrift store finds I've been living with." We stood there for a moment, both looking at the party happening around us. Someone had put music on, something with a heavy bass line that made conversation difficult unless you were standing close. Olivia moved a half-step closer and I caught the scent of her perfume. Something subtle and warm like vanilla mixed with cedar. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice lower now. "Do you actually enjoy these things, or are you just here because Ryan guilt-tripped you into it?" I considered lying, giving the socially acceptable answer about how great it was to see everyone. But there was something about the way she asked the question, like she already knew the answer and was just checking to see if I'd be honest. Mostly the guilt, I admitted, though it's not entirely terrible. I mean, I'm having this conversation with you. Smooth, she said, but she was smiling. I was gonna step outside for some air. Wanna join me? I followed her through the kitchen and out the back door onto Ryan's small patio. The night air was cool against my skin, a relief after the warmth and noise of the house. Olivia sat down on the steps leading to the backyard, and I settled beside her, leaving a respectable distance between us. The backyard was so small but well-maintained, with a few flower beds that Sophia had planted and a fire pit that Ryan had built himself with varying degrees of success. Above us, the sky was clear enough to see a few stars despite the city lights. Better, Olivia said, taking a sip of her wine. I forgot how overwhelming Ryan's parties can be. He invites everyone he's ever met. You don't live nearby anymore? I asked. About 2 hours north in Portland. I work for a nonprofit that focuses on environmental education. We do programs for schools, summer camps, that kind of thing. She paused, swirling the wine in her glass. It's good work, meaningful work, but the pay is about what you'd expect from a nonprofit. That's why you're living with hand-me-downs and thrift store finds. Exactly. She turned to look at me. What about you? Do you enjoy the carpentry work? It was a simple question, but it caught me off guard. Most people ask what I do for work, not whether I enjoy it. I do, actually. There's something satisfying about taking raw wood and turning it into something useful, something that will last. Every piece has its own personality, its own grain pattern. You have to work with it, not against it. That sounds almost philosophical. Maybe it is. I never really thought about it that way. I took a drink of my beer, which had gotten warm, but somehow tasted better out here in the cool air. What about your work? Do you enjoy it? Most of the time, I love working with kids, seeing them get excited about nature and conservation, but sometimes I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle. You know, climate change, pollution, habitat destruction can feel overwhelming. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of the party inside the distant hum of traffic. A cat appeared from somewhere in the darkness, approached cautiously, then settled down near the fire pit to watch us with that particular feline combination of interest and disdain. Ryan's cat, I asked. Neighbors, but he comes by every night around this time. Ryan started feeding him, so now he thinks he owns the place. Olivia made a soft clicking sound with her tongue, and the cat's ears perked up. His name is Mr. Whiskers, according to the neighbor. Not very creative, but he seems to like it. I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't expected. Olivia had a way of talking that made conversation feel natural, unforced. She asked questions like she actually wanted to hear the answers, and she listened without that glazed look people get when they're just waiting for their turn to speak. Can I ask you something personal? She said after a while. Sure. Are you happy? I mean really happy, not just content or getting by. The question hit me like a well-aimed hammer blow. I opened my mouth to give the automatic response. Yes, of course everything's fine. But something about the way she asked it, the genuine curiosity in her voice, made me pause. That's a hell of a question to ask someone you barely know, I said finally. We're not exactly strangers. And sometimes it's easier to be honest with someone who doesn't have expectations about your answer. She had a point. I thought about my life, my small apartment above the workshop, my work that I genuinely enjoyed, but that sometimes felt isolating. The relationships that had come and gone, none of them quite fitting, right? Like trying to force the wrong piece into a puzzle. I'm working on it, I said. I like my work. I have good friends. I'm healthy. But sometimes I feel like I'm waiting for something to happen. You know, like I'm building this life piece by piece, but I'm not sure what the final product is supposed to look like. Olivia nodded slowly. I know exactly what you mean. I moved to Portland thinking it would be this great adventure, this new chapter. And it has been in a lot of ways, but sometimes I wake up and wonder if I'm just playing at being an adult, like I'm still waiting for someone to tell me what I'm supposed to do next. How old are you now? I asked. 34, old enough to have it figured out according to everyone else. I'm 31 and I don't have anything figured out. So, either we're both behind schedule or maybe nobody actually has it figured out and they're just better at pretending. She laughed. I like that theory better. The back door opened and Sophia stuck her head out. Olivia, we're about to do the cake thing if you want to come in. We'll be right there, Olivia said. Sophia disappeared back inside and Olivia turned to me. Ready to face the crowd again. As ready as I'll ever be. We stood up and as we walked toward the door, Olivia touched my arm lightly. Ethan, thanks for the honest answer. It's refreshing. The cake ceremony was exactly what you'd expect. Ryan blowing out candles while everyone sang off key, followed by the ritual of cutting and distributing pieces to a room full of people who were already too full from party snacks. I found myself standing near the kitchen counter eating chocolate cake that was actually pretty good, and watching Olivia navigate the crowd with an ease I envied. She seemed to know most of the people there, or at least she was good at making conversation with strangers. I watched her laugh at someone's joke, ask thoughtful questions about someone else's job, compliment the host on the decorations. She had that rare quality of making people feel like they were the most interesting person in the room, at least for the few minutes she was talking to them. She's something else, isn't she? I turned to find Ryan beside me, following my gaze toward his sister. What do you mean? I tried to sound casual, but Ryan had known me too long for that to work. Olivia, you've been watching her all night. I haven't been, I started to protest, but Ryan cut me off with a knowing smile. It's okay, man. She's single, in case you're wondering. Has been for about 6 months now. Broke up with some guy in Portland who turned out to be more interested in her potential than in her, if you know what I mean. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I nodded anyway. I'm just making conversation. She seems nice. She is nice. She's also smart, funny, and according to our mother, needs to settle down with a good man before her biological clock runs out. Ryan rolled his eyes. Mom's exact words, not mine. But between you and me, Olivia's not the settling type. She's more the find someone who challenges her and makes her laugh type. Before I could ask what he meant by that, someone called Ryan's name from across the room, and he was pulled away into another conversation. I stood there for a moment, processing what he'd said before deciding I needed another beer. The kitchen was quieter, most of the party having migrated to the living room where someone had started a game that involved a lot of shouting and laughter. I was digging through the cooler when Olivia appeared beside me. Escaping again? She asked. Just getting a drink. You want anything? I'm good, thanks. She leaned against the counter, watching me open my beer. So, what's your story, Ethan? Ryan mentioned you've been single for a while. Did he now? I shot a look toward the living room where Ryan was presumably sharing my personal business with anyone who would listen. What else did he tell you? Nothing scandalous if that's what you're worried about. Just that you're a good guy who works too much and doesn't get out enough. Sounds about right. I took a sip of the beer, which was mercifully cold this time. What about you? Ryan mentioned you recently got out of a relationship. Did he give you the whole story or just the highlights? Just that it ended about 6 months ago. Olivia was quiet for a moment and I wondered if I'd overstepped. But then she sighed and said his name was David. We dated for almost 2 years. He was smart, successful, had his whole life mapped out in 5-year plans. The problem was his plans for me didn't really match up with my plans for me. What do you mean? He wanted me to move back here, get a job with better pay, start thinking about marriage and kids and a house in the suburbs. All the things that look good on paper. She paused, running her finger around the rim of her wine glass. There's nothing wrong with those things, but they weren't what I wanted, at least not on his timeline and not for his reasons. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to admit. So, you stayed in Portland? I stayed in Portland and he stayed here and found someone else within 3 months. Someone who was ready for his 5-year plan. She shrugged, but I could see the hurt beneath the casual gesture. Turns out he was more attached to the idea of me than to the actual me. That sucks. It did, but it also clarified some things for me, like the fact that I'd rather be alone and true to myself than coupled up and pretending to be someone I'm not. We were interrupted by a burst of laughter from the living room, followed by what sounded like something falling over. Olivia and I both looked toward the noise, but nobody seemed to be calling for help, so we stayed where we were. What about you? Olivia asked. What's your relationship story? Nothing as dramatic as yours. I was with someone for about a year and a half. Ended things last spring. Sarah, she was great, but we wanted different things. What kind of different things? I thought about how to explain it. Sarah had been wonderful, kind, intelligent, beautiful, but she'd had a vision of our life together that felt like someone else's blueprint. She wanted to move in together, start planning for a future that looked very specific. House, marriage, kids, the whole package. And when I couldn't commit to that timeline, she decided I wasn't serious about the relationship. Were you serious about it? Olivia asked. It was a fair question and one I'd been asking myself for months. I thought I was, but looking back, I think I was more in love with the idea of being in love than I was with her specifically. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. It's easy to get caught up in the narrative of what a relationship should look like instead of paying attention to what it actually feels like. Exactly. I was surprised by how easy it was to talk to her about this stuff. Usually conversations about past relationships felt like navigating a minefield. But with Olivia, it felt more like comparing notes. So now I'm taking a break from all that, focusing on work, trying to figure out what I actually want instead of what I think I should want. And what do you think you actually want? The question hung in the air between us. I looked at Olivia, really looked at her, and felt something shift in my chest. She was leaning against the counter, her wine glass forgotten in her hand, waiting for my answer with the same genuine curiosity she'd shown all evening. I want to feel like myself with someone, I said finally. I want to be with someone who sees who I actually am, not who they think I could become. I want conversations like this one, where I don't have to perform or pretend or try to be impressive. Olivia smiled, and it was different from the polite smile she'd been giving people all evening. This one reached her eyes. That sounds like a pretty good starting point. Before I could respond, the kitchen filled with people as the party game apparently reached some kind of conclusion. Ryan appeared slightly out of breath and grinning. Ethan, Olivia, you're missing all the fun. We're about to start charades. I looked at Olivia, who made a face that suggested she'd rather do almost anything else. Actually, she said, I was just telling Ethan about that bookstore downtown that has the poetry readings. I thought he might be interested. This was news to me, but I played along. Sounds interesting. We should probably head out soon if we want to catch the last reading. Olivia continued smoothly. Start soon. Ryan looked between us with barely concealed amusement. Right, the poetry reading? Of course. He clapped me on the shoulder and it will don't let me keep you from culture. Thanks for coming, man. I said my goodbyes to Sophia and a few other people, then followed Olivia toward the front door. She grabbed a light jacket from the coat closet and we stepped out into the night air. Poetry reading? I asked once we were out of earshot. Panicked. It was the first thing I thought of. She laughed, a sound that was becoming increasingly familiar and pleasant. Though there actually is a bookstore downtown that does readings. We could go if you want, or we could just walk. I'm not really in a hurry to be anywhere else. I'd like that. We started down the sidewalk. Our pace slow and unhurried. The neighborhood was quiet. Most of the houses showing the warm glow of evening lights behind curtains. It was the kind of night that made you want to stay outside, to keep walking and talking until the sun came up. So, Olivia said after we'd walked a block in comfortable silence. Was that as painful as you expected? The party? Actually, no. It was better than I thought it would be because of the scintillating conversation and excellent cake. Something like that. We turned a corner onto a street lined with old oak trees, their branches creating a canopy overhead. The streetlights filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow on the sidewalk. Can I tell you something? Olivia said, her voice quieter now. Sure. I almost didn't come tonight. I've been going through this phase where social gatherings feel exhausting, like I have to put on this performance of being okay. Being social, being the person everyone expects me to be. I understood that feeling completely, but you came anyway. I came anyway, and I'm glad I did. She glanced at me sideways. Not just because of the excellent cake. We walked another block past a small park where a few teenagers were sitting on swings, talking in the animated way that only teenagers can manage. Their voices carried in the still air, full of drama and certainty about things that probably wouldn't matter in a week. Were we ever that sure about anything? Olivia asked, apparently following the same train of thought. I thought I was. When I was 18, I had my whole life planned out. I was going to go to college, get a business degree, work for some big company, make lots of money, retire early. What happened? College happened. Specifically, a required art class where we had to work with our hands. I made this terrible ceramic bowl that was lopsided and had a crack down one side. But I loved making it. I loved the feel of the clay, the way it changed as I worked with it. It was the first time I'd ever made something that existed because I made it, you know. Olivia nodded. So, you switched majors eventually. Took me 2 years to work up the courage to disappoint my parents. They had this vision of me in a suit climbing the corporate ladder. Instead, I learned how to use power tools and work with my hands. Do you regret it? Not for a second. Even when I'm eating ramen for dinner because a client hasn't paid their invoice yet, I don't regret it. There's something about creating something that will outlast you. Something that will be useful and beautiful long after you're gone. That's not something everyone gets to do with their work. No, it's not. I'm lucky that way. I paused, realizing something. You have that too, though. With your environmental education work, you're helping create a generation of people who care about the planet. That's going to outlast you, too. Olivia was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. I never thought about it that way. Most days, it feels like I'm just trying to get kids to pay attention long enough to learn something. But some of them do learn, and some of those kids will grow up to make different choices because of what you taught them. That's legacy. Thank you for saying that. I needed to hear it. We had reached a small commercial district, a few blocks of shops and restaurants that were mostly closed at this hour, but there was a coffee shop with its lights still on. And through the windows I could see a few people sitting at tables, reading or working on laptops. Want to get some coffee? I asked. Unless you need to get home. Coffee sounds perfect, and I'm in no hurry. The coffee shop was warm and cozy with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. We ordered coffee for me, tea for Olivia, and found a table by the window where we could watch the occasional car drive past. This is nice, Olivia said, wrapping her hands around her mug. I don't do this enough anymore. What? Drink tea? No, just sit somewhere without an agenda. In Portland, I'm always rushing from one thing to the next. Work, meetings, errands, social obligations. It's been months since I just sat somewhere and had a conversation without checking the time. I realized I'd been doing the same thing, always thinking about the next project, the next deadline, the next thing that needed to be done. Maybe we're both too busy being productive to actually enjoy our lives. Probably. Olivia took a sip of her tea, which smelled like something floral and warm. What do you do when you're not working for fun? I mean, I read a lot, go for walks. Sometimes I'll spend a weekend afternoon at the farmer's market just wandering around and people watching. It sounded boring when I said it out loud, but Olivia nodded like it made perfect sense. That sounds peaceful. I miss that. In Portland, I feel like I always have to be doing something, experiencing something, making the most of living in the city, but sometimes I just want to sit on my couch and read a book without feeling like I'm wasting opportunities. You could do that here. The words came out before I could stop them, and we both went quiet. I hadn't meant it as a suggestion that she moved back. Exactly, but that's how it sounded. I started to backtrack, but Olivia held up a hand. I know what you meant, she said, and you're right. I could do that anywhere. I think I've been so focused on proving that I made the right choice by moving away that I forgot to actually enjoy the choice. We sat in a comfortable silence for a while, watching the few other customers in the coffee shop. There was an older man in the corner reading a thick paperback and making notes in the margins. A young woman with purple hair was typing furiously on a laptop, occasionally pausing to stare out the window with the intense focus of someone working through a difficult problem. Can I ask you something? When Olivia said eventually. This might sound strange, but do you ever feel like you're waiting for permission to live your life? Like you're holding back from doing things you want to do because you're not sure you're allowed to want them? The question hit closer to home than I was comfortable with. What kind of things? I don't know. Taking risks, making changes, pursuing things that might not work out. She paused, looking down at her tea. Being honest about what you want from other people. I thought about that, about the ways I held myself back from taking chances, from being vulnerable, from admitting when I wanted something I wasn't sure I could have. Yeah, I said finally. I think I do that. I think I've been doing that for a long time. Why do you think that is? Fear, probably. Fear of being disappointed or disappointing other people. Fear of wanting something and not getting it. I met her eyes across the table. What about you? What are you waiting for permission to do? Olivia was quiet for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd pushed too far. But then she said, I think I'm waiting for permission to stop trying so hard to prove I made the right choices. To admit that maybe I moved to Portland partly because I was running away from things here and that maybe some of those things are worth running back to. What kind of things? Family, old friendships, the possibility of building something lasting instead of always starting over. She looked at me directly. People who see me for who I actually am instead of who they think I should be. The air between us felt charged like the moment before a thunderstorm when you can feel the electricity building. I wanted to reach across the table and take her hand to tell her that I saw her, that I'd been seeing her all evening in a way that felt both new and familiar. Instead, I said, for what it's worth, I think you're exactly who you're supposed to be, even though you're 34 and don't have your life figured out, especially because of that. Anyone who has everything figured out at 34 is probably lying to themselves. Olivia smiled, and again, it was that real smile that transformed her entire face. You know, when Ryan first mentioned you tonight, I thought you were going to be one of those guys who talks about sports and complains about their ex-girlfriend. Sorry to disappoint you. You didn't disappoint me. You surprised me. That's much better. The coffee shop was starting to empty out, and I noticed the barista behind the counter beginning to clean up for closing. I checked my watch and was surprised to see how late it was. We've been talking for hours, but it felt like minutes. I should probably let you get home, I said reluctantly. Probably, but I don't want to. The honesty of the statement hung between us. I didn't want the evening to end either. Didn't want to go back to my small apartment in my routine and the careful distance I kept from most people. Walk me to my car? Olivia asked. Of course. We gathered our things and stepped back out into the night air. Olivia's car was parked a few blocks away back in the direction of Ryan's house. We walked slowly, neither of us in any hurry to reach our destination. Ethan, Olivia said as we turned onto her street. Yeah. Can I tell you something? Just between us. Sure. She stopped walking and turned to face me. We were standing under a street light and I could see something vulnerable in her expression. Something that made my chest tighten. I haven't felt this comfortable with someone in a long time, she said quietly. This whole evening has felt like finding something I didn't know I was looking for. I felt the same way, but the words seemed too big, too important to just say out loud on a sidewalk. Instead, I stepped closer to her. Close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Olivia, I said, and then stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. I know, she said softly. I feel it too. We stood there for a moment, the space between us charged with possibility. I wanted to kiss her, wanted to close the distance between us and see if this feeling was as real as it seemed. But something held me back. Maybe caution, maybe respect for the fact that she lived 2 hours away and we'd only really known each other for one evening. This is complicated, I said finally. It doesn't have to be. You live in Portland. It's not that far. We barely know each other. I know enough. She reached up and touched my cheek gently. I know you're kind. I know you listen when people talk. I know you think about things deeply and you're not afraid to be honest about difficult questions. I know you make beautiful things with your hands and you care about doing work that matters. Olivia, I said. I know this is crazy, she continued. I know we just really met tonight, but I also know that I haven't felt this connected to someone in years, maybe ever, and I don't want to let that go just because it's inconvenient or complicated. I looked at her standing there under the street light, brave enough to say what we were both feeling, and I realized that this was one of those moments that changes everything. The kind of moment where you can either step forward into the unknown or step back into the safety of what you know. What are you suggesting? I asked. I'm suggesting we see where this goes. I'm suggesting that maybe some things are worth taking a risk for. She smiled, and there was something both hopeful and nervous in her expression. I'm suggesting that maybe we both stop waiting for permission to want what we want. I thought about everything we talked about that evening, about being true to yourself, about finding someone who sees you for who you actually are, about the difference between settling and choosing. I thought about the way Olivia listened, really listened, and the way she asked questions that made me think about my own life differently. Okay, I said. Okay, let's see where this goes. Let's take the risk. Olivia's smile was radiant. Really? Really? But I have one condition. What's that? Next time we have coffee, you pick the place. I want to see what kind of spot you choose when you're not just going along with my suggestion. Deal. She stood on her toes and kissed me. Soft and brief, but full of promise. I'll call you tomorrow. I'd like that. She walked to her car, and I waited until she was safely inside before heading back toward my own vehicle. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I found myself thinking about the evening, about the unexpected turn it had taken, about the feeling of possibility that seemed to fill the car. I'd gone to Ryan's party expecting to make polite conversation for a few hours and then escape back to my comfortable solitude. Instead, I'd found myself having the kind of conversation I'd forgotten was possible with someone who seemed to understand something essential about me that I'd never been able to articulate myself. When I got home, I sat in my workshop for a while, surrounded by the familiar smells of wood and varnish, thinking about what Olivia had said about waiting for permission to live your life. I realized I'd been doing that for years, waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right circumstances to pursue the things I actually wanted. But maybe the right moment was just the moment when you stopped waiting. I pulled out my phone and typed a text message. Thank you for tonight. I'm already looking forward to that coffee. Sweet dreams, Olivia. Her response came a few minutes later. Thank you for listening, for seeing me sleep well, Ethan. I went to bed that night with the strange and wonderful feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my world. I'd spent so much time building a careful, controlled life that I'd forgotten how exciting it could be to let someone else in, to take a chance on something uncertain but full of potential. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and found myself looking forward to the day in a way I hadn't in months. I made coffee and sat at my small kitchen table, thinking about Olivia's question about what I actually wanted from life. For the first time in a long time, I had an answer that felt true. I wanted to build something meaningful with someone who challenged me to be my best self. I wanted to see where this unexpected connection might lead. Olivia called that afternoon and we talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. She told me about her work, about the program she was developing for middle school students, about her small apartment with the view of the mountains. I told her about the dining table I was working on, about the client who wanted something rustic but elegant, about the way different types of wood had different personalities. I want to see your workshop, she said, and I want to see that dining table. You're welcome anytime, I said and meant it. What about next weekend? I could drive down Saturday morning, spend the day. I'd love that. After we hung up, I found myself looking around my workshop with new eyes, seeing it as Olivia might see it. The organized chaos of tools and wood scraps, the half-finished projects, the smell of sawdust and possibility. I realized I wanted to share this space with her, wanted to show her the things I was creating, wanted to hear her thoughts about the work that meant so much to me. That week passed slowly, but not in a bad way. It was the kind of slow that comes from anticipation, from having something to look forward to. Olivia and I texted throughout the week. Nothing profound, just the small observations and questions that help you learn about someone. She sent me a picture of a hawk she saw outside her office window. I sent her a photo of the grain pattern in a piece of cherrywood that reminded me of flowing water. By Friday evening, I found myself nervous in a way I hadn't been since high school. I cleaned my workshop, organized tools that were already organized, and changed my shirt twice before settling on a simple button-down that Olivia had complimented the week before. She arrived Saturday morning with coffee from a place in Portland and a smile that made all my nervousness disappear. This is it, I said, gesturing around the workshop. My kingdom of sawdust and half-finished projects. Olivia walked slowly around the space, taking in the workbenches, the tools hanging on pegboards, the lumber stacked along one wall. She stopped in front of the dining table I'd been working on, running her hand along the smooth surface. "Ethan, this is incredible," she said. "The wood is beautiful, but the craftsmanship, you can see the care in every detail." "You really think so?" "I know. So, this isn't just furniture. It's art." She looked at me with something like wonder in her eyes. "You're an artist." No one had ever called me that before, and hearing it from Olivia made something warm bloom in my chest. "I just try to make things that will last, that will be useful and beautiful. That's exactly what art should be." We spent the morning in the workshop with me showing her different projects and explaining techniques, and Olivia asking thoughtful questions that showed she was really listening. She had a way of seeing things that made me look at my own work differently, made me appreciate aspects of it I'd taken for granted. Around noon, we drove to the farmer's market I'd mentioned, wandering through the stalls of local produce and handmade goods. Olivia bought flowers from a vendor who remembered her from years ago when she lived here, and we shared a lunch of fresh bread and local cheese while sitting on a bench in the small park adjacent to the market. "I'd forgotten how much I love this place," Olivia said, watching families with children running between the stalls, couples walking hand in hand, elderly people sitting in the shade, and watching the world go by. It's one of my favorite places in town. There's something about the community aspect of it, the way people come together around simple things like food and flowers. "It's authentic," Olivia said. "Nothing forced or artificial about it." We spent the afternoon walking through different neighborhoods, Olivia pointing out houses she remembered from her childhood, me sharing stories about renovation projects I'd worked on. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences and moments of shared laughter. As the sun began to set, we found ourselves back at my apartment. I made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta with vegetables from the farmer's market, while Olivia sat at my small kitchen table and told me about her week. "This feels right," she said suddenly, interrupting her own story about a difficult parent at one of her school programs. "What does this being here with you talking about our days, sharing a meal? It feels like something I could build a life around." I set down the spoon I'd been using to stir the sauce and looked at her. "Olivia, we've known each other for a week. I know, and I know how that sounds, but I also know that I've never felt this comfortable with someone this quickly. I've never had someone listen to me the way you do or ask the kinds of questions that make me think about my life differently." I sat down across from her at the table. "I feel the same way, but I don't want either of us to get carried away by the excitement of something new and end up disappointed when reality sets in. What if this is reality? What if sometimes you meet someone and it just clicks and trying to slow it down or rationalize it just gets in the way of something good?" I thought about that, about the careful way I'd been living my life. Always measuring twice and cutting once, always planning and preparing and protecting myself from disappointment. "You're asking me to take a leap of faith," I said. "I'm asking us both to take a leap of faith." The pasta was ready, but neither of us moved to serve it. We sat there looking at each other across my small kitchen table, and I felt like we were at another one of those moments that changes everything. "What would that look like?" I asked. "Practically speaking, I don't know yet. Maybe I look for work here. Maybe you consider expanding your business to Portland. Maybe we figure out how to make the distance work until we can figure out something more permanent." Olivia reached across the table and took my hand. "What I know is that I don't want to walk away from this because it's complicated. I've spent too many years choosing the safe option, the logical option, the option that makes sense on paper." I looked down at our joined hands, at the way her fingers fit between mine like they belonged there. I thought about the evening we'd met, about the conversation that had stretched for hours without either of us getting bored or running out of things to say. I thought about the way she looked at my work, not just with appreciation but with understanding. "Okay," I said. Okay, let's take the leap. Let's figure it out as we go." Olivia's smile was brilliant. "Really? Really? But I have one request." "Anything. Let's eat dinner first. I'm starving and I have a feeling we're going to need our energy for all this life-changing we're about to do." She laughed and the sound filled my small kitchen with warmth and possibility. "Deal." As we served the pasta and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, I realized that this was what I'd been waiting for without knowing it. Not just someone to share meals with, but someone to share the process of building a life with. someone who saw the potential in taking risks, in choosing possibility over certainty. We talked late into the night, making tentative plans and sharing dreams and fears about what we were starting together. And when Olivia finally had to drive back to Portland the next morning, we both knew that something fundamental had changed between us, something that couldn't be unchanged. "I'll call you tonight," she said as she got into her car. "I'll be waiting," I replied and realized I meant it in the best possible way. As I watched her drive away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The excitement of not knowing exactly what came next, but trusting that whatever it was, it would be worth the risk. Sometimes the best things in life come from saying yes to the unexpected, from being brave enough to whisper back when someone pulls you aside and says, "This is just between us." Sometimes the most important conversations happen at parties you almost didn't attend with people you thought you barely knew. Sometimes taking a leap of faith is the most practical thing you can do. The story of Ethan and Olivia delivers a powerful life lesson. The courage to embrace vulnerability and seize unexpected moments can lead to transformative connections that reshape our lives. At a party Ethan dreaded attending, a single honest conversation with Olivia sparked by her bold whisper, "This is just between us," shifted his world from cautious solitude to exhilarating possibility. Their willingness to share their fears, dreams, and authentic selves despite the complications of distance and past heartaches shows us that love and meaning often emerge when we stop waiting for permission to live fully. Olivia's question about waiting for permission to pursue what we truly want resonates deeply, reminding us how often we let fear of failure or rejection hold us back. Yet their leap of faith, choosing connection over certainty, illustrates that the most rewarding paths are often the ones we dare to take, even when they feel risky or impractical. This story stirs the heart, evoking our own moments of hesitation and the thrill of finally saying yes to something or someone that feels right. What's a moment when you took a leap of faith in love, friendship, or a dream? Have you ever found connection in an unexpected place, like a party you almost skipped? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experience could inspire someone to embrace their own possibilities. If Ethan and Olivia's journey moved you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification BTO for more heartfelt tales of courage and connection. Join our community of dreamers who believe in the power of taking risks for love and meaning. Your support keeps these stories alive.